to this IMechE webinar on effective strategies and lessons learnt for engineers changing their career paths. I'm Lara Mallet and I'm part of the team that guides individuals and organisations regarding professional registration at the IMechE. Now, you may be thinking I've already seen the live recording and Lara isn't wearing the same outfit. And that's because we've decided to record again because of all the technical glitches encountered. So this is take 2. At the IMechE, we've been seeing how our members' careers across the globe are being impacted by COVID. This webinar is part of a series of continuous events, support activities at the IMechE to help individuals going through career changes. To find out more, visit the IMechE webinar hub pages and see under careers and education and the IMechE general webpage. Today, for the second time, I'm really pleased to be joined by our 3 guest speakers who are going to give an insight into their experiences, strategies, advice, as well as top tips on career changes from 3 very different perspectives. So hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this IMechE webinar. We have with us today Darrell Bunyan, hiring manager at MBDA, who will be giving an overview from a recruiter's point of view. So hello, Darrell.
Hello.
We then have Sumit Mistry, Manufacturing Excellence Manager at PepsiCo, an engineer who's changed sectors and industry, including during the last lockdown. Hello, Sumit.
Hi, Lara. Hi, Sam and Darrell.
Hello. We then have Sam Greer, Education Employability Manager, Learning and Talent SSE, who throughout her career has had to reinvent herself several times. So hello, Sam.
Good evening. Lovely to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Excellent. So that's the panel. The format of this session is each of our speakers will give an overview from their point of view and experiences. Then, at the end of the session, we are going to go through the various questions which were posed to us by you, the viewers. We have also behind the scenes my colleague Alex Turnbull, who will be in the driver's seat for the presentation slides. So, Alex, could you now please bring up the first slide, which is Darrell. So Darrell's presentation is going to be about from a hiring manager, and I know, Darrell, our viewers are very keen to listen to you. So over to you, Darrell.
Thanks very much. So as Lara said, I'm here to talk about my experience as a hiring manager and to share with you what I'm looking for in future employees of my organisation, which is MBDA Missile Systems. And through this, I'm hoping to show you how you can relate your experience to new opportunities and to give you the confidence to challenge your preconceptions about what you can do. Next slide, please. So I'll start with a little about my own career before going into the key things I'm looking for as a hiring manager. I'll then provide you with some other considerations to make when applying for a new role. And finally, I'll briefly share some examples of previous companies for some of my colleagues at MBDA. Next slide, please. So I graduated Loughborough University in 2010 with a master's in automotive materials engineering, having completed industrial placements at 3M and MBDA, both in materials engineering roles. I naturally assumed my career would continue to follow a materials engineering path when I rejoined MBDA following the completion of my studies. But it was at this point that I started to realise I had skills that I could apply to other aspects of engineering. Whilst on the graduate scheme in MBDA, I undertook a number of mechanical engineering roles. And after finding these roles really interesting, I joined the mechanical design department when I completed the scheme. From there, I've worked on a number of programs, most notably C-Scepter and Spear 3. I joined the Spear 3 program as a senior mechanical design engineer in 2014 as part of a team of 2. And during my time on the program, I've progressed to the role of group lead, which I've held since the start of 2018. And I now lead a team of 18 full-time engineers. And I achieved my chartered engineering status with the IMechE in 2014. A key aspect of my current role is the management of the resources needed to deliver the programme, either as people in the team move on to new programmes or when the workload requires additional people to deliver. To achieve this, I've been responsible for recruiting new members into the team, both internally and externally, and both on permanent and contract basis. I also support recruitment for the wider mechanical design department as well. When it comes to looking at possible candidates for the role, the thing I'm looking for is transferable skills. Next slide, please. What I mean by this is knowledge and experiences gained that are applicable across engineering disciplines. And the key message here is I'm looking as much at how work has been done as I am at what the work has been done on. So, what exactly am I looking for? Next slide, please. Perhaps the biggest demonstration of how, and the first thing I'm looking for, are the candidate's behaviours. MBDA as an organisation has 5 key values, and they're shown in the middle of this slide. I'm initially looking to see if the candidate's behaviours align with these, or if there is any evidence that they don't. Beyond this, I want to see that the candidate is comfortable working both individually and as part of a wider team. I want them to be a proactive self-starter and to be adaptable and resilient to changing needs. Ultimately, I'm asking myself the question, would they fit in with the team or department? I keep this question in my mind throughout the application and interview process. It's important to say here that behaviours are a two-way street. Whilst I'm looking to see if the candidate's values fit with those of my company, this is also the time for the candidate to think about whether MBDA's values align with their own. I can't overstate the importance of having the correct behaviours. As a hiring manager, it's much more difficult to change someone's behaviours. These are an inherent part of who they are. Whereas development areas and technical skills can be supported once the candidate is in the role, through on-the-job experience, knowledge sharing, or through more formal training. This is particularly true for engineers with less experience who may be applying for less senior roles, where the behaviours are often the most important factor. Next slide, please. Moving into the transferable technical skills, I'm initially looking for experience with designing something to a set of requirements. Can the candidate demonstrate that they're able to determine design driving requirements and respond to those, whilst potentially trading off other requirements that are less constraining? I'm also looking to see the level of parts, sub-assemblies or assemblies that have been designed and the possible complexity of these. Experience across a range of parts or assemblies can be an advantage, but so too can having a lot of experience of designs at one particular level. I'm not looking for experience of designing missile components. Whilst that'd be nice, it's also not that common. It's the understanding of how to design something that I want to see. And it should be noted that the same logic can be applied to analysis roles as well. Next slide, please. Next, I'm looking at the candidate's ability to solve complex problems. Can they demonstrate an ability to break down challenging problems into more manageable pieces to be tackled? This includes being able to show an understanding of the interdependencies between the parts of the problem and how the outputs from one aspect might influence others in the final solution. I'm also looking to see that a candidate is confident in handling complicated data and is able to spot trends and themes to guide them to a resolution. Next slide, please. Related to solving complex problems, I'm also looking for evidence that a candidate can work on projects with a large number of stakeholders. These stakeholders may be internal to the team or a part of the wider business, perhaps from another department. Experience with external stakeholders is also of interest. These may be in the form of customers, suppliers, or other external collaborators. I'm also looking to see that a candidate is able to understand the differing needs of their stakeholder group and that they're able to work collaboratively in such circumstances by building strong relationships and drawing on the expertise of others to solve collective problems. Next slide, please. Also look to see whether candidate has experience in the product lifecycle or the CADMID process is perhaps more familiar. Here I'm looking to see if the candidate has experience across the cycle or if they have a bias towards a specific part of it. Generally, some understanding across parts of the cycle is a benefit, but that doesn't mean that having more experience in one particular area is not of interest. Often a deeper understanding of a particular part of the cycle can be very useful, as a project is only ever in one of these phases at any one time. Next slide, please. A key aspect of engineering is being able to manage time, cost, and quality constraints. And I'm looking to see if the candidate has experience of managing and trading these against one another. I want to understand if the candidate can show they understand the impact of prioritizing one of these over the other two, and how this may affect other decisions in the project. I'm also looking to see if the candidate has an appreciation of how these factors might vary over the course of a project. Which would they expect to be most constrained at the start, and would it be the same towards the end? Next slide, please. Managing our time effectively is a real challenge, more so now than ever, and I want to see evidence that the candidate is able to manage their work effectively. Do they have experience in planning their activities and monitoring progress of these activities towards the successful delivery of milestones? What I'm most interested in here is that the candidate can show the logic and links between different activities, which ones feed into others, and therefore in what order tasks need to be completed to achieve the overall goal. Next slide, please. Throughout the design of something, managing change to the design is a key skill and is the next thing on my list. What I want to see is that the candidate is able to understand the need for controlling change and the generic steps that may be employed when formally recording and processing changes to a design. There are a number of tools that businesses use to do this, but experience with a specific tool is not what I'm after. It's the understanding of the basic principles of change management. Next slide, please. Finally, I'm looking for some experience with engineering methods and tools, a selection of which is shown on the screen. Here I'm looking for familiarity with some of these methods rather than for the candidate to be an expert in any or all of them. Having an appreciation of some of these tools helps me to see that the candidate is able to utilize a rigorous and logical approach to developing their designs. Next slide, please. I hope that has given you an insight into what I'm looking for as a hiring manager, that this is really about their behaviours and transferable skills. It's about how the candidate gets the job done more than a specific job they're applying their skills to. I should say here that I don't expect a candidate to necessarily have a high level of experience in all of the technical aspects I've just talked about. What I and MBDA as an organisation is looking for is a balance between the candidate's behaviours and technical skills. Next slide, please. I'd now like to talk a little about role profiles and give some more things to think about when considering applying for a role. Next slide, please. Role profiles can often be a little overwhelming with a large number of expectations of potential candidates listed in them. For me, the key thing here is this is a wish list. In the ideal world, the complete list of everything the ideal candidate would have. And the main intention of this is often to show a range of skills that are applicable to the role, to make the role more appealing to a wider audience. The reality is, I never expect someone to be able to tick every one of the points in a role profile. As such, you shouldn't feel under pressure to claim you have experience you don't. I'm expecting to see some development areas, and as a hiring manager, I value honesty and integrity above all else. I want to get a feeling of a candidate's potential and to see that they have the self-awareness of where they will need to develop. The message to take away from this is that not ticking every box against a role profile shouldn't put you off from applying if the role otherwise interests you and you think you have something to offer. As a hiring manager, I expect the candidate to grow into the role to an extent, picking up the additional skills they need once in post with support from the business. And I'm not expecting to get the ideal candidate straight out of the box. Another good reason for not being put off by not meeting every aspect of the role profile is there may be another role in the same organisation that your skills may fit with. It's quite common that a candidate has skills that are applicable to several roles in a business. Hiring managers will often share potentially good candidates with each other if the candidate doesn't quite fit the role originally applied for. Next slide, please. Another common challenge with role profiles is the use of jargon and acronyms. Every industry has its own jargon, and often companies have their own as well. I know MBDA does, which can make it difficult to determine what is really being looked for. My top tip here is to think back to the transferable skills that the hiring manager is looking for and focus on the aspects of the role that fall into these areas. Remember to focus on how you do your job, not just what industry you work in. If you want clarification of something in a role profile, perhaps consider contacting the company to seek clarification. Next slide, please. Finally, aligned to some more of my company's values, make sure you do your research on the company you're applying to. When hiring, a candidate can show a real passion for joining an organisation if they can answer some questions about the business. This is often where I start during an interview. Don't sell yourself short by cutting this corner. A small amount of time spent researching the company and understanding their mission, values and product ranges will help you to demonstrate your commitment to becoming part of that organisation. There's a wealth of information available through company websites and official social media accounts. If you can demonstrate some understanding of this through your application or interview, it can add a real edge. For me, it's always frustrating when a candidate can't show a basic understanding of the company. And it makes me think they're perhaps not really that interested in joining us. Next slide, please. Lastly, I thought I would share with you some examples of places where colleagues of mine at MBDA have joined the organisation from. As you can see, we have people who have joined from companies that are in the same sector, defence, but often with experience of designing very different types of products to MBDA, whether they are land systems, helicopters, or naval equipment. We have a number of people in mechanical engineering who have extensive experience in the aerospace sector, with both civil and military aviation experiences. And automotive is another relatively common sector, with people joining with experience across this industry, from developing engines for mass production, designing accessories for vehicles, and to designing key one-off components to deliver success in Formula One. We'll also see that we have staff who have come from an entirely different industry sectors, ranging from commercial IT equipment, satellite communications design, all the way to consumer electronics. People join my company from a wide selection of industries, and this diversity brings with it many advantages. The experience of people from other industries helps MBDA to improve and change the way it does things. The world is constantly evolving, and it's recognised our organisations need to do this to remain competitive. The successful moves of these people is all about the transferable skills they've gained from their previous roles. That's the most important thing, rather than whether the companies they've worked for are closely aligned to what MBDA makes. Remember, it's more about what's common than what's different. Next slide, please. I hope this presentation has given you an insight to what I look for as a hiring manager. But what I want to see are the right behaviours and experience of the application of engineering principles that are relevant to the development of hair straighteners as much as they are to the development of missile systems. Remember, it's about how you do your job as much, if not more, than it is about what you do. Thanks, and I'll hand back to Lara.
Hello, great. Thank you for that really informative presentation, Darrell. We've also got some questions that we're going to pose to you at the end. So the next person on is Sumit. So Alex, if you would like to bring up Sumit's presentation, and we'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I'll just wait for the technology to be to catch up. Right, so hi, I'm Sumit Mistry, and I'm a senior manufacturing leader passionate about empowering teams to collaborate and deliver value to the customer. Next slide, please. So today, what I'm going to talk to you about is my reflections on redundancy. And I want to share some of my personal tips on finding your new beginning. And then at the end, I've got a small section on leveraging difference for hiring managers, and more on that as we progress through. So move swiftly on to the next slide. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So in 2004, I graduated in engineering from the University of Cambridge. My focus was instrumentation and control. However, I ended up joining Rolls-Royce on their operations management graduate program. I spent 15 years at Rolls-Royce, but roughly that career was split into two halves. The first half was largely in production management roles in the aerospace sector, with a little sprinkling of procurement, strategy development, and logistics kind of in between. I have to say that the highlight of the first half of my career was being in a production manager in the Wyco fan blade facility up in Barnoldswick. And the main reason for that is whenever I went on my holidays, I could point at the engine and point at the blade at the front of the engine and go, I'm involved in making those. So it was a bit of a shop window for me. The second half of my career it was my first real career transition, and I moved to the nuclear sector, into the Rolls-Royce submarines business. And I spent a good seven years there in senior engineering management roles. And I led the production restart of a major product for the nation's submarines program. And my departing role there was as the chief of manufacturing engineering in the submarines division. But redundancy in 2019 saw me reevaluate my career, and I'm now proud to be a manufacturing excellence manager at PepsiCo, having successfully transitioned into the food manufacturing sector. So the focus of my presentation will be my journey from redundancy to my latest transition, and I hope it's enlightening. So next slide, please. So let's talk about feelings. I know many of you will be thinking, oh no, not the dreaded F word, but I think it's really important to acknowledge those feelings and talk about them openly with friends and colleagues. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time sharing my emotional journey from redundancy to securing a new job. So some of you will be familiar with the mood elevator or the mood lift. And I'm going to use that as my y-axis for those engineers out there. And to start with, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was leaving a company that I'd known and loved for 15 years. So my entire career was at Rolls-Royce. And whilst I was hopeful about what's to come, I have to admit I was a little bit worried about the fact that I'd been out of the job market for 15 years, and I wasn't totally sure about exactly how I was going to approach it. But yeah, I did see great potential, and I was genuinely hopeful. I left in November. December, you can see me kind of lift up that mood elevator up to grateful, and that was largely because I spent some really good quality time with my family, something that I'd not done for quite a long time. And I had a whole month really where I was dedicated to school runs, school pickups, and just spending good quality time with my kids. And that really helped me kind of get relaxed and ready for the journey that I had ahead. And then in the new year, I kind of moved into kind of a resourceful frame of mind. I'd set up a home office at home, got my desk set up, got my folders, got everything kind of organized to start my job hunting journey. So and actually I felt really positive at that point. I had a good system, and I was starting to make quite a bit of traction with applications. So I knew I was doing the right thing, and I just had to be patient about it. And then a little known thing as COVID struck in March, and things went a little bit south. And my wife ended up not being able to work. She's a dentist. And so for a good 2 months, we ended up in a household where we had zero income. And that actually had quite a profound psychological effect on my application process. So all of a sudden, the financial pressure of trying to secure an income for the household became real. And you can see me kind of down there in the worried phase. Actually, the industries that I was typically applying for, aerospace or kind of defense, were seeing either a decline or hiring freezes. So all my applications went dead. I had to think about changing strategy and started moving focus towards things that were growing as a result of the crisis. So food manufacturing, pharmaceutical, medical supplies, fast-moving consumer goods was where I started to throw my applications in. And to be fair, I got a lot of rejections. I was constantly being rejected because my CV did not say food or did not say pharmaceutical on it. And you can see where my mood went. I was getting a little bit stressed, a little bit self-righteous, thinking, why can't people see the value that I had to offer them? And it really got to me, and coupled with the pressure of the household finances. But look, I had to kind of get myself back up that mood elevator. Started to still have confidence in my approach, but realized that I had to be a little bit flexible about the way that I was approaching the job market and getting myself recognized. So I started to be a little bit bolder with my networking, and ultimately that did lead to a conversation with my now boss, and that got me an interview and subsequently an offer, and that at the end of that kind of journey got me into an appreciative frame of mind. I was genuinely felt blessed that I'd got that opportunity, because it was a tough time for the market, a lot of redundancies going on, and there were a lot of numbers of applicants per job that was out there. So genuinely appreciative of what I kind of secured. So the key points, a lot of words there, but the key points that I want you guys to take away from it is it's okay to feel anything that's kind of in that spectrum that I'm showing on the mood elevator, and it's very natural to do so. But what's more important is to acknowledge those feelings and to talk about them. And the thing that really made a difference for me was as I kind of went down in that mood elevator, I found myself getting a little bit short-tempered with family at times, and what the best thing that I ever did was have an open conversation with my lovely wife about it, and that helped kind of just address those feelings and move forward. And the second thing that I'd like you guys to take away is that, look, on the job search, you have to kind of remain a little bit resilient, and you do get quite a number of rejections, right? So as I tried to apply for things outside my traditional sector, and don't let the rejections throw you off your game. Stay focused on the goal and remain flexible about your approach. Okay, next slide, please. So now I'm just going to share with you my top tips from the job search. And the first one is know what you're about. So think of yourself, you're trying to market yourself as a product. What are your strengths? What do you enjoy doing? What sort of environment makes you do you thrive in? What do you value in an organization? How do you add value? What's your moral center line? All these things are questions you should know about yourself. And if you haven't spent the time thinking about this, then I think you'll really struggle to market yourself right from application through to interview and job offer. So very deliberately at the start of this presentation, I introduced myself as a senior manufacturing leader, passionate about empowering teams to collaborate and deliver value for the customer. Very deliberately chosen words, but in there, threaded in there, is what I'm about. And what I learned to do was to thread that through my application process, right from the start through to interview and job offer. Once you understand what you're about, the next key thing is about targeting your marketing. So making your CV and your LinkedIn profile say exactly that about you. And then once you've got that general content for your CV and your LinkedIn profile and cover letters, you've got to be careful to tailor those specifically for the job that you're applying for. So pick out keywords, lift out relevant achievements, and look for how you could add value. So know what you're about, and then look to align your marketing to the application that you're going for. Thirdly is network a lot. The best way for me to kind of describe this is picture a hiring manager. The best way that I kind of got it was picture a hiring manager with a large pile of CVs on their desk and a short pile of CVs on their desk. Now, the large pile is the big glut that comes through the application system, and the short pile is the one that maybe a colleague or one of their team has approached them with, oh, I know you got this vacancy. Have a look at this person. I'd recommend them to you. So the challenge for networking is, how do you get yourself on that short pile? Yeah, because the hiring manager is not going to look at that entire big pile. They're going to look at the short pile, and your challenge is how do you get on it? And you've got to be a little bit creative about that and be bold about how you reach out to people. And the last tip there is think beyond searching for a job. So, you know, when I look at my journey from November to securing the job at PepsiCo, in between all that, I did everything from exploring self-employment. I even explored franchising. I was actually really, really close to signing a franchise agreement, ready to launch my own business. But circumstances led me down the path of securing the job at PepsiCo. But the key point is, think about how do I secure an income stream as opposed to how do I get a job, and you start thinking a bit more broadly about what you have to offer. I mean, in my time in my job search, or in that period between November and July, I did everything. I did lots of learning, invested time in myself in learning new skills. I spent time learning forex trading, property investment, cybersecurity, self-employment course. I did lots, and I would strongly encourage you to invest time in yourself. Okay, next slide, please. So this is, and I don't wish to claim credit for this particular, the Leveraging Difference Cycle. So anyone that's read it, The End of Diversity as We Know It by Martin Davidson, fantastic book. And it talks about how we, rather than talking about diversity in the strictest sense, it talks about leveraging difference. And one of the things that this slide is about is my real plea to hiring managers who are listening to this webinar. And it's more of a reaction to the fact that I constantly kept getting rejected for not having had food or pharmaceutical or fast-moving consumer goods experience. Is that difference is not just about it's not just about the things you can see, you know, the protected characteristics or anything like that. It's actually about people coming from different industries and can offer your industry something different. So if I kind of use me as a specific example, I come from nuclear most recently into food manufacturing, and actually, whilst it's, you know, the risk levels are completely different, some of my experiences from working in a nuclear environment from a safety point of view is actually providing a different lens to the way that a crisp manufacturing facility operates. So, and it just brings that, opens up the solution space for problems that any business might have. And whilst this slide is about hiring managers, thinking a bit more broadly, the other thing that I'd also encourage you is as a job seeker, don't try not to put yourself in a bucket. And Darrell talked about it quite well with regards to the tick boxing and making sure you don't take yourself out of the game because you don't believe you've got a skill that's relevant. So in my case, if I use myself as an example, I haven't got program management or project management as a qualification on my CV, despite the job description asking for it. I knew that I'd been involved in programs before, and I was able to leverage that and sell that capability. So that's just a very small example, but don't miss an opportunity because you don't appreciate how capable you personally really are. Okay, so last slide is my summary. So just to revisit what I've just talked to you about is think of redundancy as an opportunity. It does present an opportunity for you to try something new and branch out a little bit and create a new beginning. I talked quite a lot about my emotional journey, and it's okay to have and express your feelings. And what's most important is that you acknowledge them and that you talk about them and then use that discussion to kind of address them. Rejections, you do get a lot in the job search world, but they're not personal. It's not you that's necessarily a problem. It's about alignment, and eventually you will find a hiring manager that connects with you and continues your journey. Have a system that works for you. So I talked about me setting myself up in the start of the new year. I got a system that worked, that and then I trusted that system and refined it as I got feedback from all the applications that I got. And I can't emphasize enough network. The job that I got today was actually because I reached out to the manufacturing director. I was a bit bold about my move, but it resulted in me getting an interview. I talked about thinking beyond the job. Don't just think about finding a job. Think about other things that could secure you a source of income. And I explored a few things myself. And also don't forget to invest in yourself in terms of your learning and your development. And lastly, my plea to hiring managers is try not to rule out candidates because they don't come from your specific sector. Think about the opportunities and the business opportunities that having people from different sectors offers to your challenges. And that's my presentation complete. So my last slide is just if you just move on to the next slide, it's a thank you from me. And look, I am on LinkedIn. If anybody wishes to reach out to me, please do. I'm happy to help where I can, but please do reference this webinar so I know where the leaders come from. All right, wish you the best of luck with your search. Over to you, Laura.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you for that really interesting insight, Sumit. We've now got Sam next. Sam, so last but not least, we've only got about 12 minutes for you, Sam, if that's all right, just so we can get in the questions. So we've got Alex, our presentation driver, and I'll hand over to him and to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Lara. Really, everything's been covered by the two previous presenters, but I'm just going to share a little bit about the journey that I've been on, which is very different. I'm not from an engineering background. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk through my journey and how I've had to assess the opportunity that's been around me and really reinvent myself to make sure that I provide the level of income to keep my family safe and secure. And throughout all of that time, I've really utilized my network. Next slide. So when about 20 years ago, I am married to a tree surgeon, and we answered the phone during the storms over the Christmas and New Year period, about 1998. And from that, we ended up being able to scale his business. I left my business development role and joined his business as managing director. And we secured a £1.6 million contract with Scottish Power and ultimately ManWeb at the time, which is quite interesting because now I work for SSE, and we did at the time do some of the cutting around the power lines for SSE too. But it was a really exciting time, perhaps the best experience of my life in some ways, because we were constantly reinventing ourselves and making the business take on new ideas and expanding, and we ended up with 42 employees. Just at the time that we had a mini pandemic, I don't know if you can get a mini pandemic, but the foot and mouth crisis came along, and overnight we were shut down. So I really relate to some of the businesses now that are wondering whether or not they're going to survive this time, and I do really empathise. And at that time where we managed to get back out and secure ourselves again. We kept everybody employed. We started our contracts. We'd actually depleted a lot of our cash. So ultimately, after 10 years, we made the decision to close the business. And that was perhaps the most emotional journey I've ever been on. Talking about your F word there, Sumit, the feelings that left me with were incredible. And my husband too. It was obviously a family business. So we overnight had no income. And I felt personally, as the managing director, unemployable. My husband was a tree surgeon, so he had his trade, but I'd been able to negotiate large contracts. I'd been able to organize finance. I'd learnt to climb trees, as you can see on the slide here. I could reverse a transit, not with a chipper on the back, but I could do all of these skills. I had HR skills, I had negotiation skills, but when I looked at the job adverts, nothing seemed to fit. Next slide, please. I've actually jumped a step here because what I ended up doing was the one thing that I felt I was passionate about other than trees. I loved running a business. So I actually got a job with Perth and Kinross Council as a business advisor. And it was very fitting. It was clearly using my talents, but I didn't enjoy working in the public sector at that point. So I decided to uproot my family and move us to the south of Spain. None of us spoke any Spanish. We didn't have any contacts. We found out the trees were very short and it was only olive trees, so my husband didn't have any work. We set up our house as a bed and breakfast, and my husband ran that, and I set about networking. I went to Spanish language classes. I found that there were an expat community, and I networked, and I managed to offer myself for free to local olive oil companies, to a hotel, and I also secured some teaching. But I did identify that there was lots of teaching for children in teaching English in Spain, but there weren't so many opportunities for adults. So through a contact, I was introduced to a large factory, a food packaging factory, who were actually a multinational company, and I started teaching the directors. And through more and more networking, I ultimately set up my own business and had a very successful language academy. For personal reasons, we chose to return to Scotland. Next slide, please. And I went back to my safety zone. I went back to business consulting, being a business advisor for the local enterprise agency, which was Business Gateway. From that, I went to work for one of my clients, but each time I wasn't really fitting what I wanted out of life. It wasn't the fulfilling role. It wasn't the buzz that I'd felt from the tree surgery business. But each time, what I've done is I've identified what I can call out as my unique selling point, and actually utilized my networking. So I've turned up at the networking events. I've identified which ones were successful and which ones were a waste of time. And what I noticed is that, calling back on my time in the tree surgery business, we had really struggled to recruit young people. So this became my USP. I went to a government organization called Developing the Young Workforce, which was set up as a response to the fact that there was a big gap, a big divide between the young people coming out of school and going into industry. Through that, I started understanding about apprenticeships, and I went to work for Skills Development Scotland. And from that led me to apply for a job as the Education and Employability Manager, which is the role I hold now at SSE. But really interestingly, my line manager actually knew me through running the tree surgery business. We hadn't been in touch for a very long time, but she'd actually been at one of our events where we had been awarded the most improved small business for investors in people. And so when my CV landed, she straight away noticed who I was. So I went from that that big pile that Sumit talked about to that short pile because she knew about me. And not only that, what came over loud and strong in my application was that I had strong commercial acumen. And also I'd been at the sharp end of running my own business. Next slide, please. Now, all through my job, since LinkedIn has been a thing, and clearly it wasn't when I was running the tree surgery business, because we actually closed that 15 years ago. But from arriving at Perth and Kinross Council as a business owner, I started talking about my feelings about business. I started identifying things that I could share that was relevant to small businesses. As my interest shifted, my technique stayed the same, just my sector changed. So it went from business to English language to everything Andalusian. And then when I arrived back in Scotland, where I'm based now, it was again focusing on young people, work-based learning, sector skills gaps. And what I've done is I've watched other people on LinkedIn. I've followed influencers. I've shared things that I thought was of interest. I started then getting confidence in posting about what I was doing as a professional. And then I started actually writing some articles. And I think what's really good to remember is with LinkedIn, you have a really direct route to your audience. So whatever your experience is, wherever your USP lies, start sharing, start writing about it. It only has to be a few words. You can just share someone else's and just put your own few words at the top, but just put your personal angle on it and be nice. Share other people's as well. That pays dividend. Next slide. So conscious of time, but I'm just going to give you some takeaways. I remember on several occasions, I've had 3 occasions now that I can remember where I felt unemployable. The first time was when we closed our own business and I didn't know where to turn. The next time was after I'd come back from Spain and I'd actually gone to work for a client and the culture just was not right. The business owner didn't want to grow the business even though he thought he did. And so it was really a difficult time for me. And then the third one was when I landed the job as a managing director of an engineering apprenticeship company. And straight away knew the culture wasn't going to be right. But at the time, you feel it's permanent, and it really isn't. And Sumit, I loved the journey that you showed, the emotional journey that you've been on. And when you're at the depths, you truly feel it is forever, but absolutely it isn't. Make sure you believe in yourself. Make sure you recognize what your transferable skills are that Darrell brought out earlier, because they are really useful to other businesses. It doesn't matter that you've had to change sector. It doesn't matter even if you have to change discipline. You're still bringing an awful lot of experience with you. And utilize the network that you've built up. Find new networks. Go and follow people. Obviously, at the moment, you can't attend networking events, and I'm not always sure they are worthwhile. But reach out to somebody. Reach out and ask them for help. Don't necessarily ask them for a job, but ask them for help. And most importantly, be seen, because if you're not being seen, then people won't know that you're there. And very best of luck if you are now in a position where you are having to look for a new career. All the best. And if I can help you at all, just with, as Sumit said, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, you'll find me. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for that, Sam. That's really been interesting getting an insight into your story. So I'm hoping all our presenters will be able to show themselves. And it's now over to the viewers, and I've got the questions that you've posted to us. So the first question I've got here, it says, it sounds like Darrell actually reads applications. However, I've learnt many recruiters use software on their first sift. I have a long career with wide experience. I'm trying to transfer career, but no luck getting past the first sift. How do I beat ATS software, that's application tracking system, to get an interview? Darrell, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a challenging one. I think for me, it's not something that we use that I'm aware of, particularly at MBDA. But my advice would be, if you can, apply directly to the company you're interested in. Look at their direct applications rather than coming through maybe some other systems which are more likely to get filtered out. And I guess to echo the points that Sumit and Sam have both put out there, the network that you can leverage can be a real way to get in to the shortlist, as Sumit put it. Use the people you know or people that they know. Get yourself out there and use that to get through.
Great. Thank you for that. Which brings me to the next question, which is all about networking. So it says, Sumit, you mentioned being creative and that networking really helped you. And this is to Sam and Sumit. What tips would you give for networking remotely, and how can we be creative with our networking? So Sumit, first for you, what would your response be?
So I actually... if you recall, when I said I set up my structure at the start of January, I had a system, and I actually built in blocks of time in my diary where I set myself a target. I will approach 4 people that I don't know in that time fence and just try and connect with them. But in today's kind of more remote world, the secret weapon is actually LinkedIn to me. I found that LinkedIn was a really good avenue to try and find people and connect with them. So if I was applying for a job at a company, I would search the LinkedIn for who do I know. If I don't know someone, who's second, and who do they know that's in my network that might know that person, then I'll reach out to that person and try and find my way through to somebody in the organization, ideally ultimately the hiring manager, but if not, somebody who can give me some insight and maybe as a favor get me a CV on the desk. So that's just one way. I don't know if Sam's probably got some more.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you're authentic on LinkedIn. And certainly, like you, Sumit, LinkedIn's been my best friend for a long time now. I think it's quite hard to reach out to somebody cold. So it's much better if you've got a relationship with somebody. So you're in a difficult position if right now you need to reach out to somebody. But if you have time, then perhaps find a way of connecting with them first. The one thing that turns me right off any connection is if somebody connects with me and then immediately sends me an email. I have been approached many times recently because I work for SSE and we're a large employer and I am in the HR function, and people are always reaching out and saying, can you help me? And I have to say that I always do my best. I actually can't be much help because I'm not dealing with recruitment. I'm dealing with the graduate program and the education outreach. But I can certainly put people in touch with the careers page and I can explain how SSE recruits and things. So yeah, be authentic. Try and actually build a real relationship with people because it will pay dividends.
Great, thank you. So I've got another question here. It says, I'm applying for junior roles. However, my previous salary information is handicapping my application. How do I overcome this? So I guess Darrell, and probably all 3 of you, but Darrell, what would your answer be to that?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I think perhaps something that I don't see very often and that Sumit actually brought up in his presentation is maybe the dying art of the covering letter with your application. And sometimes as a hiring manager, what we see is a cold hard, this is a previous salary, and you try to ignore that as best I can. What's the person looking for in the job? And I think that's the real thing that you can get across that can remove that potential barrier for some people. Be able to come across as passionate about why you want to join that organization, why you want that, role, particularly as, and Sumit talks about it quite nicely, about tailoring your marketing and your application to suit the role that you're applying for. Because actually, for me, that passion is the first step towards building that really good relationship that will help you break down some of those other barriers. And that passion overcomes a whole host of other challenges. And I think for me, that's what, as a hiring manager, certainly one of the things I really look for. And if someone really wants to take a job, the salary's not always the biggest driver for a lot of people. And I think that's appreciated now.
Either of you got any points? Others we'll move on so we can get through some questions. Anything you want to add? Should we say Sumit?
So from my point of view, I try and avoid all salary related questions if I can. So if there's a box to fill in that says what's your current salary, I would genuinely just ignore it, or prefer not to say, or whatever it is. I think that it's important to look to reach the alignment between the hiring manager and yourself, and then if that connection happens and there's an offer coming your way, then that discussion can manifest itself, and then you can start marketing yourself at the value of the role, and yourself, rather than limiting yourself to the, especially if you're junior, to the lower baseline.
Great. Thank you. I've got another question here. I'm finding the prospect of changing career very overwhelming. What first step should I do? So, Sam, just with your career, what advice would you give?
Just believe in yourself. Honestly, if you have passion and you've identified what you've got to offer, then they would be very lucky to have you. So believe in yourself.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to do another question here. What tips would you give to transition from engineering into management? I'll start with you, Sumit, this time.
Tips from engineering into management. Well, I think if I can just broaden that question out a little bit, tips from this feels like a little bit of a promotion type thing, or transitioning generally. I think the first thing you got to look for is a little bit like what Sam said, is knowing your own strengths and knowing what you're good at. So whilst you might say, as an engineer, I've got no one working for me, but actually in delivering the projects that you're doing, you have to kind of lead. No project is done by itself, and there's a pseudo team that you're working together with, that you're leading, right? So if you can demonstrate that kind of leadership and understand what that's about, you can transition into management fairly effectively. So it's about looking for the commonalities and necessarily the big differences. And then once you're in role, there's many quotes where if you think you can't do something, we'll take the opportunity and then figure out how to do it when you get there. The rest of the role you got to learn when you're in the role, right? And there's always people around you you can seek advice from or learn from.
Great. Okay, I'm going to do another one here. Let's do this one. What key thing should I do to stand out as an applicant, Darrell?
I think for me, it comes down to that passion for coming into an organisation. I think it's the foundation of a good application. If you can really show a commitment to that organisation before you're even in it, that really builds a good rapport straight away. And as I sort of said in my presentation, one of the most frustrating things for me is when I don't get that from a candidate. They might have really great technical skills.
Darrell, we're going to have to interrupt there. If you can wrap up just in a couple more seconds, as we're nearly running out of time.
Okay, so that's really the message. That's the message for me, really. Come across as wanting to be part of that organisation.
Brilliant. So thanks, everyone. I want to say a big thank you to our speakers, especially doing this for the second time, and to you, our viewers. And we want to all wish you the best of luck in your job search. Do look at the IMechE career and education pages for advice. And if you've got any ideas about future webinars, do contact us at the IMechE if you're interested in a registration. If you're into that aspect, then please email bdm@imeche.org. We should be closing fairly soon. We'll just say goodbye, but we might have one quick question. Do you think, Sumit, being a chartered engineer influences the hiring process? Has it helped you?
My short answer to that is, I think being a chartered engineer gives you a ticket to the party for certain job roles, but I've never had the chartered status asked of me when I apply, if you know what I mean. So it's I kind of my perception is it's a ticket to the party, and look, we've talked a lot about networking, so it's actually an avenue for networking is the institute. So that's how I got to meet you, wasn't it, Laura?
It was indeed. So we should be finishing soon, but just while we've got a few minutes, I just want to also say that, so we get that quite a lot. Why become registered? Think about it as an independent assessment of your skills. It's not like a reference. You have to show your commitment to your development. If you go to an organization that doesn't understand what chartered, incorporated EngTech is, then explain that to them. Explain about the rigorous assessment you've had, that it's been about your qualifications, but it's also been about your work experience. So it looks like we've got a little slightly more time. I'm not getting the countdown yet, so let's try and squeeze one more thing in. If your experience doesn't match the role description, but you have the relevant skills, how do you get past HR? Sam, have you got any questions with any sort of answers to that? How to get past HR?
I think you need to, in your cover letter, actually answer what they're asking for and demonstrate how it transfers, because HR follow processes in many cases, and so you have to make it easy for them. Try and look at it from somebody else's perspective. I always get somebody else to check over my applications for me, and it's amazing how much you've assumed yourself or you've missed.
Great. Thank you. I think we've still got more time. So just another one I've got here. I've not been working for nearly 2 years. Would that be of concern to a hiring manager? I don't know what issues there are. I just simply can't get a job. So I might go back to you, Darrell, on that one.
Yeah, it's a frustrating one, I'm sure. I think for me, no, it doesn't really make a big difference. Career breaks happen for a whole multitude of reasons, none of which are this person is not a good employee. So for me, it's not a driver. It's probably something we would talk about, but it wouldn't, with the candidate that is, but it wouldn't be a blocker. I've employed people who have had breaks in their time in engineering, and they're fantastic. So I hope it's not that's stopping that person from getting through that door, because for me, people have career breaks for all sorts of reasons: families, illness, want to do something different for a couple of years, whatever it might be. There's a whole host of really good reasons that actually add quite a bit potentially as well. So no, that wouldn't be a barrier for me.
As we haven't stopped, we'll carry on going. Any response or anything you can add to that, Sumit and Sam?
I would just say transparency, be upfront about it.
Yeah, and go on. I think it's, for me, it's be proud of that break and be and express, like you said, the honesty of it, but also express what you might gain from that experience as well. See it as a positive.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to carry on going. I'm going to ask another question here. And this one is, I am a mechanical engineer in automotive and have reskilled during the pandemic to move into software developer role. I'm currently applying for jobs that I understand I do not have the industry experience. I'm not getting any responses, let alone an interview. What advice would you give a mechanical engineer moving into a completely different new field? So who would like to answer that? Sumit? Any where you've moved from nuclear, from aerospace into food?
So without really knowing the specifics of this particular application, but the my guidance would be, when you're moving sector, And if your CV doesn't express that specific experience, then I think you really have to then get a bit bolder with your networking and reaching out and building rapport with people, as Sam nicely puts it. It is my strong advice. And a lot of the tips that Sam gave in her presentation are probably really appropriate for this one.
Great. Anything the other two we'd like to add?
I think that's right. What Sumit just said there, and again, it's come back to that transferable skill stuff. There's a load of fantastic skills that you'll have as a mechanical engineer that you can still apply, albeit to a different discipline, and come back to that, how you've gone about doing your job, and think about how you deliver what you're doing as part of selling yourself, to say, I can apply what I've learned, albeit to something else.
Great, thank you. Well, we've definitely gone over our hour, but the clock hasn't stopped. I am going to wrap it up, and I think I'm going to ask one more question just about this one here. What mistakes do you think individuals do or should avoid when changing a career? So, Sam, on that one, are there any things you're looking back at that you think, oh, I should have done that differently?
So many. So many, but it's mainly been about the culture and the values of the business that I've joined that haven't been right. And actually, in my gut, I've known it, but possibly because the package or the position was so attractive, I've put that aside. And actually, it's really held me back, so much so that on a few occasions, I've had to take a real sideways step to get into a better organization that I can progress in and on and up in. So yeah, listen to that inner voice and make sure that you really want to go and work with that whole team.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I am going to wrap it up now. We have gone over the hour, but I just want to reiterate my thanks. It's been really great getting to know you. And I think your insights have been brilliant because they've just been so varied and so different. And we know for our members, these are such challenging times. We are hoping to do more, and maybe we'll do a second round with the technology lets us. We'll get back together in a couple of months and maybe do an update. So want to say thank you everyone else, and we're going to just actually all hang up now. We're all going to press our red button to hang up, and all the best. Take care. So we're going to hang up now. Bye-bye.